Welcome everybody. How's it going? I'm your host, Indy, and we got Jay Powell here from Powell Group Consulting.
Hello.
There we are. What's up? How's everyone doing? Hope you guys are doing good. So, we are here, Indie Game Business, Powell Group Consulting. You can follow the Twitter at Powell GRP, which is short for group, obviously. And also there's the LinkedIn link down below. So, hey, how's it going, trolls? So today we are going to talk about quite a few things here. The first thing we're going to talk about is events. PAX just happened, right? So let's talk a little bit about what to do after PAX. What
so we're assuming we're talking about the developers that have gone and tried to use PAX for business.
Yeah, let's talk first, because the way, like what I was telling you earlier, I feel like there's two developers, or there's a couple of different kind of developers. Three, actually, not two. The first type is a developer that's been there, that showed their game off and they had a booth. Another type is a developer that just went and was there on the floor. Maybe they have a game or they're working a game. And then the other type of developer is somebody that just wants to be a developer or is working towards being a developer. So which one you want to talk about? You want to talk about somebody that went there for business networking, has a booth?
At the end of the day, they're all mostly the same. I mean, and that's one of the things that irks me and that I've seen for years is we have extremely passionate, extremely creative folks that go and they create these games, but they don't know how to do the business end of it. The basic blocking and tackling that comes along with actually growing your company and, being successful at these things. So, in a sense, no matter which one of those you are, in the spectrum, it all comes down to, a lot of the same type of stuff. I mean, you have to do the basic blocking and tackling, as we say, go and be professional and pitch your game and then, follow up and do all that sort of stuff. The basics, basically.
Right. Okay. So let's say someone's going to PAX and they've been doing that. They're going to meetings. What do you advise for someone to do when they go at PAX? Does someone do different things depending on where they are at in development? Or?
There's two, when you go to PAX, or it's like EGM Res is going on right now in London. And I mean, there's a show like every 2 weeks, it seems like. But, it always is going to come down to the same type of stuff. You're there to pitch. You're there to, you want to have your business cards as much as everybody especially the younger generation. They're like, oh, we don't need business cards. That's for old people. Trust me, you need business cards. And you need business cards that aren't black on the back so people can write notes. But, you want to go, you want to meet with the people that you're scheduled to meet with. And that's one thing you got to keep in mind. It's like, you can't just show up at PAX and be like, I'm going to pitch my game to 15, 20 different publishers, because those publishers have been booked up for, 3 weeks. You've got to start planning for this stuff way out. But say, you're at the show and, you've done your meetings and you've shown, the game to several different publishers. Now you come back, you take stock of those notes. I mean, always we recommend having some sort of CRM solution. You don't need Salesforce, because Salesforce is ridiculously expensive for what we use. But even if it's something as simple as a Excel spreadsheet, come in, put the name of the company, the person, their email address, phone, Twitter, whatever in there, and, start keeping notes, because you have to keep up with all this stuff. You have to be able to say, okay, I haven't talked to that guy in 3 weeks. I should check in and see what they're doing, because publishers are busy. They're looking at 80, 100 games a week.
Right.
They're not going to be the ones that are, constantly pushing back to you. You have to be proactive in it. So, when I come home from a show, I spend the first 2 days, frankly, decompressing and, getting all of my notes and business cards and all that sort of stuff, organized and in the system and all that sort of stuff. And then, say I came home on the weekend, Wednesday or Thursdays when I start reaching out and following up with everybody. If you do it like the day you get back, everybody's overwhelmed and they're just
everyone else is decompressing.
Yeah, exactly. And trying to catch up on a week of emails that they missed when they were at the show. So, give it like 2 or 3 days and then go out and follow up and say, hey, look, I appreciate the meeting. just as a reminder, here is, what we talked about, and here's the game, and here's a demo or a test flight link. Don't take a bunch of, printed out PowerPoint decks and things like that to your trade shows, because as someone who's been doing trade shows for 20 years, I can tell you where all of those end up, and it's in the hotel trash room, trash can in the hotel room. When you do that follow-up is when you need to start sending out your materials and things like that.
And like you were saying, for CM, the important thing is, and you can have all the information of everybody, you can have their Twitter, you can have all that stuff documented, but if you don't write notes, you're just going to have a bunch of names. You don't say, I talked to this person about this is what they're doing, this is what I did, this is when I talked to them. You're just going to have a massive list of people and places, and you're going to be completely overwhelmed. And it may take some time to write notes, but it is so
even if
it
it's just, I'm looking on my desk to see if I actually have a business card laying around on my desk. But, even if it's just as simple as...
I've got one right here. Here, look at that.
So on the back, just write a note on it. And like, this is who we talked to, and this is what we did. Yeah, see? But it's hard to write on that one, Andy.
Oh, I know, but that way people will remember me. They will know that it's me. And this is my streaming card. This is not like my business one. That's different.
I love that. But I mean, you have to, even so I usually do 5 shows a year, and you figure that over the course of 20 years, and I still get home with a stack of business cards that's like that thick. And I'm like, who in the hell was this guy? Where did I meet him? Because a lot of your networking when you're at these shows is not on the show floor. It's at the hotel lobbies and the bars, the parties afterwards. And after, a couple of beers and you're tired and it's late at night and you meet somebody and you wake up the next morning and you're like, I have no idea who that guy was. That's when it's always useful to take those little notes.
Right. No, that's a good idea. Or best place is when you're taking a lunch break at the event. You just sit there. So many people will come in and out of there. It's pretty amazing. But yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so you've got all this stuff and you're following up. Oh, that's the next graphic. Here's follow up. Follow up with those people, right? You've got them all organized. Like, this dude's a publisher. You've got your publishers over here. You've got, other developers here. So you want to follow up. You want to build. People talk about networking, right? And networking is fine. Networking, the definition is something like to grow your business. But I feel like in this industry, you kind of also want to befriend people.
Yes.
On a certain level. I mean, but I would imagine most people, something that's even in a big corporation, you want to have some kind of rapport with that person. You don't want to just like, hi, I'm so-and-so, here's my business card, and give them an elevator pitch and that's it. Because that will immediately get forgotten. Don't you agree?
Yeah, no, that's one of the things whenever I go and talk to students, this is a big industry, it's billions of dollars, and there's, a lot of really big companies, but at the end of the day, you need to talk to everybody and treat everybody, with respect, because that bridge you burn will absolutely unequivocally come back and haunt you at the end of the day. I mean, the guys that, when you first start out and maybe they're in QA and testing and, wherever they are, over the next 5 or 10 years, they stick in the industry, they're going to be C-level, at that point. And so, networking it's good from a social point of view, but it's also good from, that business point of view, because you do get that time where you can just hang out and talk about completely random things that have nothing to do with the industry, but you remember that person and they're going to remember you. And even if there's not business to be done in, the next 3 months, 6 months, a year, maintaining that relationship is very important.
Right. Okay, so we actually have a list of upcoming shows here. Graphic up for everyone to look at. Bam. Casual Connect Europe in London. That's in May.
Yep.
Oh,
that's coming up quick.
E3 is my birthday.
Really?
Yeah, E3 is on my birthday. I don't know if I'll be at E3 is amazing. It's
E3 is a nightmare.
Yeah.
I haven't gone in like 2 years because it has changed so much. So the first E3 that I went to was actually in Atlanta, Georgia. It wasn't even out on the West Coast. And over the years, it turned into such a huge marketing show versus, developers and publishers and getting deals done and that sort of stuff. Then it died, and then it came back. And, even the last E3 I was at, which wasn't last year, it was the year before, I spent all of my time in the JW Marriott lobby across the street from the show. I think I went into the show like twice, because that's where the business stuff happens. When you go to GDC, the business stuff happens in the hotel lobbies. You'll have folks that don't even have passes to get into the main show. But E3 has always been one of those that I'm like, it's not a good place for indies to go and try to get a deal done, because it's all about the big guys and the, multi-million-dollar marketing projects and all that kind of good stuff.
But it is fun to go look at stuff there.
Yes, that part is very true.
And now that they open it, because it used to just be press, right?
Yeah, they're in like this weird, they don't have an identity right now. Gamescom is, to me, the quintessential major show of the year. They have, I think it's like 14 halls. Each one of them is like the size of one of the halls at E3. And they have it completely separated into the business side and then the consumer side. And so you go on the consumer side, and the business folks can get in there before the crowds do. And it's nothing but just wall-to-wall esports setups and, all strictly geared to the consumers. They have one hall that is nothing but swag from all the publishers and developers. So you have that fun stuff going on, but then there's another 6 halls that are dedicated to just the business aspect of it, where you can actually have a conversation and hear the other person, which is always the problem when you're at GDC or something, not GDC, but E3.
Right.
It's like, it's so loud you can't hear anybody. But they've got it. They do it right when it comes to consumer and business. And so I keep waiting for E3 to get to that point, but they haven't yet.
Well, I like what Casual Connect does. Casual Connect is, it shows stuff off, but it's all business. It's all about connecting with other developers, with publishers, with businesses. And we'll talk about this later, but they also have competitions there. Okay, let's see what else is there. Casual Connect in Serbia, which I want to go to because I hear that's freaking beautiful there. Pocket Gamer, you were talking a little bit about that. You were saying how important that was, Pocket Gamer.
Well, Pocket Gamer is like Casual Connect. They're very focused shows, and Game Connection is the same way. You've got the big ones. You've got your E3s and your GDCs and your Gamescom, but especially when you're an indie team, going to Casual Connect, going to Pocket Gamer, going to MIGS, which is down there in Canada. And this isn't even like everything. We're not even talking about the White Knights conference. And, there's a BitCurrency conference going on, in a couple of weeks. If you have the budget and you want to fly around the world all year, you could do a show like every 2 weeks if you wanted to.
Yep.
The smaller shows that are more focused, you're going to get more attention there. You're going to have a, better time meeting and talking and engaging people than you do at, your E3 and your Gamescom. The beauty of, I was at Casual Connect Berlin last year, and I was at the one in Seattle. I missed the one in Anaheim, in January. But the beauty of it is it's compact. You don't have to worry about spending 30 minutes getting from one end of the hall to the other. If you don't schedule properly at E3 and GDC, you got a 20-minute walk in between your meetings, and which cuts into the time that you have to meet with people.
With Casual Connect, you can be like, I'll be back in a minute, and then just run across the whole thing.
Yes, exactly. And that is so much more convenient because you don't have all the fluff there. It's there, for business. And those are really good. And then, like we're going to talk about in a little bit, it's got the indie competitions in there as well.
Yeah. Well, Casual Connect is specifically. Okay, let's see. And you were talking about MIGS. I've never even been to Canada.
I haven't.
Check it out.
Oh, Canada loves me. They pull me out of immigration like every single time I go. I don't know why, but I always get stuck over in the "we need to talk to you" line.
Funny. Okay, so competitions. Let's pull that up. IGC or GDC. The IGC at GDC, the Independent Game Festival. That's in October. Oh, that's the submission date is October.
Yeah. They do it. I mean, they obviously just did it at GDC, but for indie teams, these are so important. Because not only it's not even all about winning them. I mean, that's a beautiful thing, but if you're selected to be a finalist, you're sitting there and you're going to get showcased on the floor. We had streamers at, the Casual Connect in Seattle that were, streaming these games from the floor and interviewing the developers. All of these are an excellent way to get feedback from real people, from, real executives and people that are veterans of the industry through the process of the, my brain just like shot right there. The
Natural selection.
Yeah.
And that's important too, because a lot of the time you will be working on a game and you get feedback from people and they'll be like, oh, that's awesome. You're not going to get real, actual, solid feedback. You will get the feedback that your friends are going to give you.
It doesn't matter how good your mom says your game is. That doesn't count. That's you can't use your friends as testers, and expect the family side of it doesn't work either.
Yeah, expect real, actual results. Okay, what do we Gamers Voice Award? Oh, that's at South by Southwest, which is amazing. They actually this year or last year it was huge in the gaming. The gaming the year before that was just kind of a small thing, but this last year, I mean, Twitch was there. It pretty much blew up in gaming.
They just slam it in there right next to GDC though.
Yeah.
And so we can only go to so many different shows. And so, especially for smaller teams, it's hard to, fit all of these things in.
And it's tiring.
God, yes.
There was one year that we went to GDC and we had to leave in the middle of GDC to fly out to PAX East. That was the year when there was a big storm in Boston and there was like snow piled 20 feet high on the side of the road. Oh my God. So we went from GDC walking around in shorts to being freezing cold. And man, I got sick.
As you're saying, then everybody gets sick.
Everybody got sick.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody gets sick. Not fun stuff. So yeah, those competitions are super important. What do you think about like the Ludum Dare or Ludum Dare, as people call it? That kind of stuff.
You lost me there. Went there. Hold on. Gotta remember, I'm on cold meds today.
Oh. Did you lose my audio?
No. I'm just like, like the game jams.
Yeah, the game jams.
Those are awesome. I mean, those are good as well because it gets you out of your comfort zone. As a developer, being able to sit down and say, okay, we've got 48 hours or a weekend or however long it runs. That one's actually fairly long, but those are great opportunities to, one, get yourself out of your comfort zone of what you've been making and what you like. But two, again, it's about feedback. And so much of our industry, when it comes down to making a successful game, comes down to, iterative feedback. Who are you talking to? What kind of feedback are you getting? Are you doing straight up focus testing? Are you in early access? I wrote an article on LinkedIn and even look at the big games. Part of the reason that Fortnite has, blown right past PUBG is they are iterating on that game.
Right.
They are making quick decisions and, finding new things that players think are fun and things that aren't. And that's what all of these game jams teach you is the whole, you've got a finite amount of time, iterate on this, do something quick. It may not be pretty, but make it fun. And that's just, I think those things are fantastic.
That is really a huge difference between Fortnite and PUBG. PUBG is like, here's the game, and this is what it is, and then that's the way the game is. Fortnite is like, oh, well, this week we're going to have 50v50. Oh,
yes.
let's throw in these new weapons. Oh, why don't you guys try out this stuff? Oh, and they have so many different modes that they just cycle through. Every week, every month, there's something different to do. It's not the exact same thing. And I think that is helping them really move forward. And
the benefit back to Epic and the developers on that is they can use those modes to actually play test things and test new features and all that sort of stuff. When they did the sniper challenge, the first Sniper Challenge special mode where it was only like sniper weapons and revolvers. They were actually testing some of the issues with the scopes and the sniper weapons by doing that. And
Without
so,
anybody knowing.
yes, yes,
Yeah, I think that they played it really smart.
yes, it did take, Nick, it did take 5 years of experimentation, and it took, but it wasn't. The interesting thing about Fortnite is it wasn't 5 years of iteration on this battle royal mode. It was like 5 years of iteration on the single player game. And it was, they couldn't ever, find something that was really, really engaging. And then, they dropped the battle royal mode in there and it just exploded, But yeah, that game has been in development for like 5 or 6 years at this point. But it was all on the, that single player save the world mode.
Which I don't find fun.
I don't, yeah, that's part of the problem.
I don't find that story more fun. I mean, it's okay.
But if I'm going to hop in to spend 30 minutes playing something, I'd much rather spend 30 minutes on the Battle Royale mode. I don't know why, but I am much better at Fortnite than I am at PUBG. And, there's latency issues and cheater issues that you can factor in there. But, it's a more engaging and welcoming game than it is than PUBG was.
Right. And I like the fact that you don't have to you have a different clip you can put in your gun. Oh, you can do, I don't like any of that stuff. I like, this gun's better. Let's just drop this other one.
It's purple.
I
want the purple one.
I want the golden one. The golden one. That's what I
think
want.
It's interesting how, Blizzard over the years has driven the color coding in all of these different games because the color coding that they use in Fortnite is exactly what you get in WoW and all the other, the Blizzard games.
That's funny. Well, it goes to show you how things carry on, but it's not like it doesn't feel like, this is from Blizzard. You know what I mean?
It doesn't. It's just you just kind of accept it. It's like, I know purple's good. That's
green is much better than gray.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got some questions here. It's question time, Q&A time. Bam. Self-publishing versus publishing through a publisher. What's your view on it?
So most of my views on these things comes down to it depends. 2 years ago, I would have said, yes, if you as an indie team can do your own marketing and your own testing and your own, PR basically, then yeah, you can self-publish because you don't need a publisher to get into Walmart and Best Buy and GameStop where we used to have to sell everything on retail. You just need to be able to get to the Apple Store and Steam and what have you. That's not true anymore. I mean, we've seen so many games. I mean, there's like 100 games released on Steam weekly and the same on iTunes, and it's become more of a discoverability battle. I absolutely recommend, especially for first time developers, you need to get a publisher. I mean, you need to find the right publisher, and there's like I know for a fact, there's over 500 publishers out there. Finding one that is interested in your game, isn't insurmountable, but you have to have that level of expertise that's in there. Developers that have been doing this for a long time, they don't need, if they've already launched games and they know how it works and they know how to do the discoverability side and the marketing, it's less of an issue. The only, if you're doing something free to play, you absolutely, without a doubt, have to have a publisher unless you're willing to drop, $100,000, $1 million a week into user acquisition for your game. The indies doing free to play mobile games, it's tough. It's nightmarish, really tough. But when you're coming to, single player and console games and a lot of the other stuff, you didn't necessarily need to have a publisher because you could publish on Xbox and PlayStation, and you could get it out there on Steam. But now those markets are so crowded that it's tough. So I mean, 2 years ago, I would say, yeah, let's do self-publishing, and we would help studios self-publish, from my company. But now it's much different. It's much more competitive. But I've been doing this for 20 years, and I see these cycles come and go. And I have publishers that I've, speak to now that are like, yeah, we're going back to retail because, the digital side has gotten too competitive and too overcrowded. And that was the one that kind of took me back a step, and I was like, wow, did not expect anyone to say let's go back to retail, but they're having success with it. Yeah, everything in this industry comes down to a cycle. But yeah, right now in the market, the way the market is, I would say find a publisher.
And that's it has kind of cycled around, because there for a while it was, indie games. Then it on the Xbox 360 they had the indie whatever it was where you could buy games for it. But then indie games kind of went away from consoles, and it's Steam, Steam, Steam. And then the Nintendo Switch came out, and now I hear a lot of developers say things like, I've been on Steam for 6 months. We just released our game on the Switch, and we sold more games in 3 days than we did in 6 months on Steam.
There was just an article I saw about Shovel Knight and how it has sold more on, just trying to find that real quick.
Shovel Knight was super popular.
Yeah.
Everybody was streaming it.
Now they've sold more of it. They've sold more on Switch than they have anything else.
So it used to be back in the day, an indie game or indie company was a company that self-published, right? But then there came out indie publishers. So now what is the definition? Because I've heard some studios, they will have 100 people working, and they're saying we're still indie. So what do you think the definition is? Or
everybody's got their own opinion, and you get the whole. It's like bands. They're like, oh man, they're not indie. They completely sold out. But indie to me is more of a mindset than anything else. It's like, yes, you can have 100 people working on it, but if you're doing something that is unique and not the status quo, that's what to me defines indie more than what your budget is, or how many people you have working on your studio and all that stuff. If you're doing things that are actually out there innovative and not the norm, that to me is what embraces that indie mindset more than the fact of we've got 4 guys working in a garage, which we do. I mean, that's still a lot of studios. Right. You look at Stardew Valley was created by 1 guy over 4 years. That's ridiculously, impressive to do that. But that's one of the biggest arguments that I always see online. It's like, what classifies as indie and what doesn't? And there's a whole lot of indie, publishers out there now. Some of them have experience in the traditional publishing world. Some of them are, PR and marketing firms,
right?
That, have transitioned into that.
Mm-hmm. He said, Trigger says, that's like your opinion, man.
I know. And that's the thing. Hey, that's exactly right. Because when it comes down to, those definitions of indie, it's not something that's clear cut. It's not something, that's
not anymore.
No. And when I say I want to sit down and play some indie games, it means I don't want to play Fortnite. I don't want to play, I want to play something like Don't Starve or, those types of games more than something that I know, it is like the traditional FPS sort of whatever.
I kind of look at it as more like an indie game is something that's not AAA. It's not from a AAA studio.
Okay, but all right. So yes, but then you got to define AAA. I mean, you got games like Shovel Knight and Stardew Valley that have made more money than a lot of AAA games. So, where does that fit in? That's why I always like the genre, the design aspect of it more than, the sales and the AAA thing. No, you're not seeing EA and Activision and, those guys doing indie games, no matter what they claim they are. But, you've got indie games that for a lot of people would classify as AAA because they've sold so many units. Yeah.
Or they're so good, or they look like AAA quality.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. Okay, so according to your view, what kind of games are highly welcomed? What kind of games should beginner developers try to develop?
Make what you want to make. And this question is like timely because we saw the death of Steam Spy this week. And, I understand Steam changing the TOS and all that kind of good stuff, but it sucks because Steam Spy was such a good resource for the small to mid-tier studios to sit down and say, okay, these types of games are selling and these aren't. I was a part of a group that we would make estimates. I mean, it wasn't like fantasy football or anything. We weren't putting money down on it, but a lot of us in the industry, and it came from, people like me to brand new, students coming out of schools, a wide variety of people in there. But we would sit down and look at what's coming out in Steam and make projections on what we thought would do well. And the thing is, like, none of us were right all the time. But having Steam Spy that would give you, some realizations on these types of games are selling well or these aren't, that was awesome. That was great to have to, justify the business end of it. But at the end of the day, you have to make what you want to make. I mean, how many people would have sat down and said, okay, you know what would really be good this year is like another Battle Royale game, or let's do a PC version of Harvest Moon. There's when you get that passion involved in a project, that's what makes them good. You can sit down and spend all the time you want making a game that you're like not really bought into yourself, but it's not going to be as good.
So basically, make a game that you would want to play.
Yes.
There you go. I also feel like if it's your first games or first couple of games, don't just like, I'm going to make, Skyrim.
An MMO.
Yeah. Yes. Or an MMO. If it's your first game, make something simple, it doesn't have to be graphically amazing. It can be 2D. It could be a simple platform type game or whatever. Something that you'd want to play, but don't make a game that you're not going to finish. Because your first game, I feel like it's more important to finish than for it to be totally awesome.
Now I'm like looking up articles again. One of the things that's really big right now is these micro games.
Mm-hmm.
And, very, very, very simple games that take like 2 minutes to play. But from a business standpoint, they're exceptionally good right now. And there was an article I saw, it was like last week, about a guy who had made 50 some games, and then the latest one is the one that hit, and I can't find that article right now. But especially for brand new developers coming out, or even if you're not if you've worked at a bigger studio for 5 years and you want to come in and do something fresh on your own, these little micro games are excellent ways to get going and get started on your own and do things that are fun, but it's not something you're going to sit down on and spend 6, 8, 12 months on putting together. To establish credibility as a developer, either a developer studio or an individual developer, and this goes for designers as well, it's all about what you've shipped. And if you can come in and say, here's this game we want to do, and here's these other 3 games that we've released, but they haven't had a huge amount of success. I've seen so many games over the years that weren't successful, but were also, there's so many factors that can go into what makes something, truly successful from a business standpoint, or sales, or all that kind of good stuff. I want to work with the teams that have shipped product, that know what that last 10% of the development cycle, is really like when you're trying to get it out the door and, polished up and all that kind of good stuff. So, those are an excellent way to get in. But at the end of the day, find something you like, because if you don't like working on it, you ain't going to work on it long.
Definitely. I'm also a trained 3D animator, and I've worked on games that I wasn't really passionate about, or the type of games, and it was kind of a struggle to keep going on and be like, oh, I got to get this done. But I've also worked on things that I thought were awesome. I'm like, yeah, I can't wait to see this in the game, and it does kind of make a huge difference, especially when you're working on it for hours and hours. So let's see here. Another question. How rapidly is the gaming industry changing today? What's the future hold for developers?
I get that a lot. And it's one of those that, yes, it's changing, but it's all a big cycle. What's new now was the same thing that was new like 5 or 6 years ago. What's changing is the biggest change, frankly, Indy, is people like you. Streamers have completely thrown the marketing world of this industry on its head. And, you saw pushback like 2 or 3 years ago at E3 when E3 was like, yeah, we're going to let the streamers in, and all the traditional journalists just completely went ape shit because they're like, well, they're not real journalists. It's like, no, but they're the ones that are selling games. So the Twitch and YouTube and Mixer and all of these different platforms, that is the biggest change in the last several years. The rest of it is just hardware. It's we're not going through a huge hardware cycle right now. We're not like looking at the PS5 or the Xbox 2. I don't know what they're going to call it because they've got that numerology so mixed up. But
All right.
we're not dealing with that anymore. But we are still seeing a cyclical change in what is popular. First-person shooters, aside from like Call of Duty and the big tentpole games, weren't that big 2 years ago, and now that's changed. Sim management games, which were huge in the late 90s and early 2000s, died out for a while, and now they're coming back, and things like that. So a lot of things change, but they stay the same. But the biggest change in the last 2 years has been the streaming community.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Big time. But then, like, sometimes, like Trigger was talking about, Scott Cawthon, he was doing Christian games and religious stuff, and he does a 180 and he made Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's was such a simple mechanic, but it was something that's never been done before.
Well, what Christian games have always been interesting to me because given the user base that you have access to, especially now with mobile and self-publishing, like a publisher 5-10 years ago wouldn't touch a Christian game for anything. They're not going to try to put it on the shelf at Walmart or Best Buy or any kind of religious themed games. But now with the ability to self-publish this, even years ago, I was a little surprised that they never took off in the way that I felt that they had the potential to. And Scott's a great example. He's like, all right, let's try something completely different, and it explodes.
Well, yeah, you would think that Christian things would explode, considering the state that people are in right now, especially in the United States. But I actually worked on a Christian game. I was a beta tester in the 90s for Enlightening Studios. Catechumen was the name of the game.
I don't remember that game.
Yeah, it was a first-person shooter. But instead of killing people, you save them. And I was a beta tester on that game, and I submitted so many bugs to it, and all of them they just excused. That's not a bug. That's da-da-da-da. I'm like,
it's not a feature.
Yeah.
It's not a bug. It's a feature.
That's funny.
But and Trigger that is a dead-on right comment. It's like, and people will sit down and they're like, well, traditional game reviews. I don't know the last time I looked at Metacritic when it came to a game. And that Metacritic and PC Gamer and all of these review sites were such an integrated part of the business side of this. You would have contracts that say, if your game scores above an 85 or 90 on Metacritic, then you get a bonus, hundreds of thousands of dollars the publisher would throw at you. And they are still looking at it to an extent. But now it's, why do I want to go? It's like movies. It's like, why do I want to go and listen to somebody's opinion that may or may not be what mine is, when I can just like turn on Twitch or YouTube and like start watching people play? And that's a much better.
That's what I do. I'm like, if I'm interested in a game, maybe I want to play it, I find it on Twitch and I watch a little bit and see if I might like it. Big time.
See, all you streamers are breaking everything now, ain't you?
There's a few games like Gary's Mod that he played because Cassie Mexican played it and it looked kick ass.
And that's what it is. I mean, that's what you look at all of the way that the marketing trends are going in the industry now. It's like all about influencer marketing and how do you get influencers engaged in your games and all of that sort of stuff. And it's been a huge upheaval on the marketing side of the industry.
So what are the main challenges that the gaming industry gives entrants today?
Discoverability, getting noticed. That's the biggest thing.
That's the biggest one. Just because there's so many games released on Steam right now, so many games out there. There's some, like the game I was just playing, Phantom Halls. That game is amazing, That is one of my favorite games. Were you watching me play that earlier?
Yeah.
I love that game. It has some really cool features and gameplay that is not in any other game, and yet, when I looked on Twitch, nobody's playing it. No one's streaming it. It's an amazing game. It's like, I feel like so many things are just either you have to have a bunch of money poured into it, or if it's an indie game with a low budget, it just has to luckily be found somewhere.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's the discoverability aspect of it. It's like you can't. 10 years ago, you could go to a GameStop and they had that section of the wall that was like the top 10 best-selling games. And you would notice like number 2 didn't even have a game on it. It was just like an empty box because the publisher had bought that spot. Those weren't really the 10 best-selling games in the store. Those were the places that people, had bought those spots to get in there.
Really?
And now, yes.
Wow. And we were so dumb, we would just fall for it.
Yes, they called it it was a term we used in the contracts, and I can't remember what it was. But I mean, it was, I think it was MDF. But, it had some technical, name. But what it really was the amount of money that the publisher or the distributor had to pay to the retailer to get prime viewing, spots on the shelf. It's like when you go into Best Buy, back in the day when there was a PC game section, the games that were right there at face, level, those publishers had paid more money to put them there, or, they were selling well enough that Best Buy moved them up there, for a week or so. And so that's how a lot of the product placement and the, discoverability was done back then. It was like, who can make the flashiest box and get it in the right spot? But now, it's you've got all these games coming out at once. Even being featured on Apple isn't the boost in sales that it used to be. You get a spike, but that's what it's always been too. You get a spike and the minute it's not featured, you get a plummet. But now that spike in sales isn't even, as much. So I mean, getting out there and getting noticed is without a doubt the biggest hurdle that these companies have to hit. And that's why we said, go to the competitions, go to these shows, anything that you can do to get your game out in front of people, because you never know when, that smaller streamer who's playing your game gets noticed by a bigger streamer, and you just kind of like move up the streaming food chain in terms of how many views you're getting. So, the technical standpoint isn't really as much of a hurdle anymore. There's so many, engines out there that lets you really go in and do what you want to do and build functional games. It's the discoverability of the marketing aspect of it.
And I think even Steam noticed that, because it used to be, if you had a game, you would get it on Steam, you would have 3 exposure rounds or discoverability rounds where they would put it on the front page. You would get 3 of them. And now they upped it to 5 or 6, I believe, just recently. But still, when that happens, it's not gaining the success like it used to. Back in the day, I remember with video games and like music too. I grew up listening to heavy metal, so you would go and you couldn't listen to the music, so you would like pull up the record or the CD, and you'd be like, "Oh, this has the most badass cover. Let's get this one." And that was it. Whatever had the most awesome cover, that's what you got. So here we go. Here's a good question. Why is it important for a developer to come to a consulting firm like Howell Group Consulting?
For the same reason you go to a publisher. There's things that we're really good at. We track 3,500 developers and another 500 some publishers. So, we just sit down with that game and go, all right, here are the 75 to 200 publishers that, are going to make the most sense for you. I can't code. I can't draw. I've done a little bit of design work over the years, but not, anything major. But, everything is very specialized now. And, that's what, I saw when I started this company 7 years ago. It's like there's a niche for somebody, and I've done the business side of this industry my entire career. And, you've got to have somebody who's super focused, and when, so many of the indie teams have maybe their lead programmer or their lead designer also doing the business end of it. That's taking time away from doing, the things that are important to make a great game. And doing the business end of a game, that's not a part-time job. That's a full-time job. And so, whether you're going out there and trying to get your game noticed that you've made, or you're just going out there and trying to find new contract work to do, it's not something that you can like turn on and turn off. I mean, you have to be doing it all the time. So, we see a lot of specialty companies pop up in the industry, everything from art and music, which have been around for a long time. But, I've got a friend of mine who runs a consulting firm that focuses on free-to-play game design and monetization. I mean, it's a very specific part of the industry, but that's where their focus is. And so, our focus is on, the business development and the licensing side of the industry.
Okay, so is it kind of the same thing that a publisher does, or different, or what kind of? Can you talk a little bit about exact things that you do?
So the publishers are going to be the ones that go out and, they've got the relationships with Steam and Apple, and, they're the ones that are going to go and coordinate the actual launch and manage all of that stuff. And we used to do a bit of that, when we would help these studios self-publish. We would sit down and say, okay, look, you need testing. What's your budget? What time frame do we have? We go out and we talk to a bunch of different testing studios and manage that process. The publishers are the ones that are going to actually bring everything to market these days. We focus on, getting developers in front of the right publishers and helping them negotiate the contracts, and, helping them qualify those publishers to make sure that they are good for their game. But I mean, over the years, we've worked with developers, we've worked with publishers who have come to us and said, we have these IPs that we, want to get games made out of, but we're not very happy with some of the proposals that have been coming in, left and right. So we sat down and completely revised their RFP process and went out to we didn't go out to 1,400 studios. We started internally with a list of about 1,400 studios, and then boiled that down till we had 3 or 4 that we thought would be a really good fit. We've worked with conferences to, help bring in more developers, more publishers. We've worked with IPs to help them find the right developers to work on their brand, that sort of stuff. I mean, our big, connection here is all of the network and the experience on that end of it. We've got our CRMs are tagged down to the fact that if somebody comes to me and says, Jay, I need a developer that can do a fantasy-based multiplayer free-to-play game on Android, I can plug that into our system and it'll spit out a list of about 200 developers who have done, those types of things. So, that's our specialty. It's building these partnerships, whether it's a developer and a publisher, or if it's a conference and sponsors, but, leveraging our experience and, our connections to, help build good partnerships in the industry.
So a lot of legwork.
Yes.
Yes. So that actually led up to the next question, which you kind of already answered, and said, I'm going to ask it anyways. We're a game developer studio with a team of 10 people. Our focus right now is to work on medium-sized projects, 6 months to a year, and acquiring them is our priority. We're searching for partners who can bring these projects to our team. Do you think that your company have contacts in this area that need this type of work?
So yes, that's one of the fundamental things that we've done for years, is sitting down and saying, okay, let's help studios bring in these RFPs. And I've worked on the developer side of that. I've worked on the publisher side of it. I've been in the middle of it. And when we talked about it's a full-time job to do that, we will have, a couple of years ago, we had a period of about 4 months where we didn't get a single RFP in. And then we got 9 in 1 week. It's a matter of, when we talk about doing that basic blocking and tackling of biz dev, it's checking in with these publishers, every 3 months minimum, because things change quickly. And so that's part of what we're going out and doing, even if it's not on a, behest of a client, if it's just, internally, and maintaining these relationships, we're constantly going out and talking to these developers. I mean, the publishers are saying, what are you seeing? What are you looking for? We do a big survey every year. And so we're in the process of cleaning up all that data right now. We're going to release it, in terms of, here's how many publishers are doing PC games versus doing console games versus doing AR and VR games. And we've established the reputation of we know a lot of folks. And so when you are that, that mid-sized 10-person team, it's a lot of work to go out and constantly check in with these publishers to see if they've got anything coming down the pipe that you can work on. But you have to be doing it. You can't like, hey, we got a project, we're gonna be working on this for the next 8 months. And then, 6 months in, you go, oh, we got to have another project in 2 months. Doesn't work like that. It's you never really know. And it's tough. I mean, quite frankly, you constantly have to be looking for work, but then you have to manage the people hours on your end too. It's like, what if you get this great opportunity that comes up midway through a project? Are you going to bring a bunch of people on? Or are you going to shift people off of what they're doing onto something else? It's not easy. I mean, and I wish I could give you like this big silver bullet of this is how you do it, this is how you fix it.
This is what we do, but I'm sure it's always something different. It's always something different. And you gotta expect the unexpected, right?
There's always a wrench that gets thrown in it, left and right. But if you're that size team and you're trying to do keep the contract work coming in, it's an ongoing process. It's a never-ending process. You have to constantly be out there. The big facepalm moments that I have is when I set up. So one of the things that we do is we help studios prep for shows, and that comes down to making sure their demo's ready, making sure they've got the right materials ready, and coaching them through how these meetings are going to go and what they need to focus on and what they don't. And then we'll go out for some of them and actually set up meetings with the publishers. And then we'll turn around and like a year later, we're getting ready to go to the same show. And I'm like, yes, you had a meeting with them last year. How's that going? Well, I don't know. I haven't talked to them, since that show. And I'm just like,
follow up.
Yes. Even if there's nothing to be done, you still check in. You still, because you've got to remain front of mind with all these publishers too, or they're going to go to, whoever, did their last project or whatever. So it's a year-round constant, thing that you have to be working on when it comes to the business side of it.
This kind of stuff actually also translates to being, if you want to work full-time in live streaming, you have to do the same kind of stuff. Follow up, meet people at shows and follow up, keep those contacts fresh, make those relationships. Okay. Here's a really interesting question. Finding IPs, toys, movies, comics, etc. that could translate well into mobile games is something we have started looking into. How can you help us with this?
Finding the right IP. All right, and so there's the basics that we start with when we start looking at IP. One is does this brand or intellectual property fit with the core demographics of the platform? Then does it fit with the core demographics of the genre, the type of game you want to make? And we had a brand come to us about 3 months ago, and he's like, we want to do a kids game, and I can't say who the brand was, but it was most definitely not a kids brand. What he wanted in their head was like a mass market casual type game. But and I told him point blank, I was like, I can't see a kid or family playing a game based on this IP. It just doesn't. It's not going to make sense. So if you're a developer, so one, I'm a huge fan of getting an IP, because it helps you so much for that discoverability side. You still have to make a good game at the end of the day, but if you've got a brand behind it, it's going to make your life a lot easier.
Especially for things in the future too.
Oh yeah, it's when you can go in and say, Coca-Cola trusted me with their IP to do a game. It makes you look all that much better. But first, you need to sit down and say, really look at the game you're making, the game you want to make. Who is that ideal customer going to be? And then cold meds. Cross-reference that. That's the word I was looking for. With who are the fans of this IP. So a classic example is at my last company. We started doing hidden object games at the end of the hidden object craze. And, we knew going into that mature of a market that there was no way no matter how good the game was, Big Fish is launching like 5 games a day on their site. We weren't going to get noticed. So I was like, all right, we got to get an IP. And so I, literally called my mom and I'm like, you're the demographic for this game. What do you read? And she gave me a list of 10 different, authors. And I went out and talked to one of them. It worked out. We ended up doing a, casual hidden object game based on a New York Times bestselling author, and it did well.
Wow.
But that's what you have to focus on, So, all right, and that's step one. Then, you want to make a short list based on who those people are, what those IPs are, and then you want to start, chewing through that to find out, who is actually going to support you along the way. We had a company out in LA that owns several 80s movies franchises call us and they're like, can you go find a developer? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. What I was like, what are you looking for? And they're like, we want a couple $100,000 up front. I'm like, okay. There aren't a lot of studios that are requiring that, especially for a movie from the 80s these days. And I said, so what kind of support are you going to be able to give these developers after launch? And he's like, oh, no, we don't do anything. We think the name of the movie, does enough. I was like, thank you for calling. And because that's not, if you're up against, you're looking at some IP that they want, 6 figures up front, and then they're not going to do anything to support you, that's not a good fit. You got to have
they needed some money.
Yeah. Like. Well, I mean, they were used to, that's how these deals used to be done 10 years ago. I mean, one of the reasons THQ is out of business was because they chunked so much money into a lot of these IP-based games that they had, and they were doing that. They were, shelling out $500,000 for, a movie game or what have you. But that's not the market anymore. You need to have an IP partner that has, we call it social footprint. They need to have a bunch of Facebook fans and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube followers so they can market your game to their fans. And if they're not willing to do that, you think long and hard about whether or not you want to work with that IP or not.
Wow, I actually never even thought about that, but that makes total sense. All right, I think we got time for one more question. How can I expand the sales of my PC game through other stores besides Steam?
You got to find them all first. There's probably a dozen or 2 dozen stores, that are out there aside from Steam. And that's one of the things that we preach. And, the long tail side of, sales is, yes, Steam controls 80, 85, 90% of the market, but, there are other companies out there that are doing it. And you're not going to see the same number of sales. But, it is absolutely imperative that when you're launching that game, that you do 2 things. One, you get it launched on as many of these platforms as possible, because a lot of those things do add up over time. But the other thing is you need to make sure you're localizing it into all these other different languages as well. English, French, Spanish. The big ones these days are Russian and Chinese. The Chinese PC market has just exploded in the last couple of years. And so, when you've got your game ready and you're ready to submit to Steam, you need to be hitting, GOG, Amazon, and I've got a list of them somewhere I can put up, that we can send to folks. But there is a substantial list of stores out there that aren't Steam. But when you do that, you also need to always be focusing on the localization side of it and how, and frankly, that's something you got to plan from the very beginning, but that's a topic for another day. But, if you really want to increase the sales of that PC game, you get it on as many stores as possible in as many languages as possible.
And on the Switch.
And on the Switch.
Right
well,
now.
The Switch, so the difference between the PlayStation and Xbox right now, Xbox is letting anybody that wants to publish it, and that's terrifying. But, Nintendo is actually curating their stores. We've got a client who has been making Nintendo games since the GBA days. And, we called up and he's like, I have not been able to get a Switch dev kit. And so, we called our guy over at Nintendo and he's like, all right, well, let's look at the game you want to make. And that's what, you take a step back and you go, okay, wait, they know they're killing it right now. And they can't let their eShop get so overcrowded. It's already getting overcrowded. but they can't let it get out of hand like Steam and all these other shows or all these other stores. So they've got to, curate it a bit. And so you're not going to get a Switch kit unless you can convince the folks over at Nintendo that you've got a successful and or an interesting game that you're going to get on there. It's not just simply let's order a dev kit and let's roll.
Here's a question. This is my question. What do you think would happen if Steam backpedaled and decided to start curating games like
they can't? They're too far down that rabbit hole.
They're too far down. You don't think they could go like, okay, we're only going to release, 2 games a day from now on?
Well, that was one of the reasons they did that whole, $100, which was a joke. They were like, okay, we're going to get a lot of the crap out of the store that's launching every day. And they're like, if you have $100, now you have to pay $100. And it was just like, eye roll. If they put it somewhere along 500 or 1,000, yes, it is seriously going to cramp, a lot of the indie gamers out there. But, if you've got a project that you're passionate about, getting $500 or $1,000 to get on a store that's going to yield you, multiple times that isn't insurmountable. It's not pleasant. I'm not going to say it's for everybody, and it's not going to cause us to lose some really good games along the way. But Steam is way too far down that rabbit hole to step back and go, yeah, okay, now we're going to start curating things.
Well, it makes sense. Oh, Pyre said something. Some of us streamers want to be highly successful, but can't afford to go to these shows. You don't have to go to those shows to be successful at all.
You really don't.
You don't have to.
I don't even go to as many shows as I used to. I think I was 5 or 6 last year, and this year I was like, okay, that's just like way too much. If you, from a streamer point of view, and this is something that's like so interesting right now because we've got streamers that are like, we really want to get into these developers and get noticed and get some of these good games that we can stream. But at the same time, you've got developers that are sitting there just slamming their face on the desk going, we can't get any streamers to notice us. Engage these developers on Twitter, on their own site or wherever it may be. You don't necessarily have to be at that show to be able to get their attention. You just need to be passionate, be professional, and do what you love and go in, and you'll get that. You'll start getting that access to the content that you need.
Right, and there's a lot of indie developers that, regardless of the size of your stream, they are more than happy to hand out keys. Some of them are not, some of them, the bigger ones that are already kind of successful, it's harder to get a key, but there's so many games out there that it's easy. And really, events are good. I mean, they're awesome. They are great for networking in person and meeting people and getting them IRL and seeing someone face to face. But you can still do that kind of stuff online. It's not.
You can. You really
going to an event's not just going to make you successful, because also, just like there's a bajillion people streaming on Twitch, there's also thousands of streamers at those events, all trying to do the same thing as well.
So I just cheated, went over to Pyre's page. You got 750 followers. I mean, no, you're not PewDiePie, but that's not the people that tend to get ignored by the developers or the people that have 8 followers. The fact that you've even got 750 followers, that's good. So, look at the games that you like to play. Reach out to them and say, here's my site, here's my Twitch page. These are the types of games that I like playing. I want to play your game and take it from there. I mean, don't bug them like every day, but start reaching out and engaging it. I mean, you've got a decent fan base, man. I mean, you can do that, but you've got to do the basic blocking and tackling and business end of it. They're not just gonna come to you.
Yeah, dude. It's just get on Twitter. You see a game that you like, find them on Twitter, reach out to them on Twitter. It's super, super easy. Send them
go to their webpage and email them.
Yeah, it's just, if you reach out to someone on Twitter, they just might respond.
The streamers and the situations that developers want to avoid are the key sellers. If you can get out there and when you show that you're not somebody that's just going to go, hey man, give me 5 keys so I can stream your game, that's the ones that show up red flags. If you're going and you're saying, this is my channel, this is what I enjoy streaming, this is what I focus on, and look, I already have followers, hit it up on Twitter or just go to their website and email them and say, hey, look, I'm interested in doing this and I like your game. You can do it.
You can do it. Yeah. It's all legwork, man. It's the legwork and perseverance. All right. Well, that's our very first episode, Indie Game Business, with Jay Powell, that guy right over there. Right over there. PowellGroupConsulting.com, Twitter.com/PowellGRP, and also on LinkedIn right there, the Powell Group Consulting with dashes. That's wordy. Michael Merchant, what's up, buddy? First episode done. All right, so thank you guys. I'm Indy. I'm from twitch.tv/Indy, and really that's it. You got anything you want to say, Jeff? We'll be back next week.
Thank you.
Yeah,
this
thank you
is something I want to
guys.
do for a long time. I'm happy.
Yes, thank you guys so much.
Send us your questions for next week.
Yes, that's it. Send questions to this right here. Tweet them out. Hashtag Indie Game Business. There we go. Indie Game Business. Thank you. Thank you, man. All right, you guys, have a good one. Here's a little music for you. Here's a little indie music for you.